Google latest AI video generation.
Book flights in ChatGPT.
Meta is beginning to train the Lambda 3 and aims to open source AGI. Welcome to This Week in AI. Hey Yash, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited this week. We're back in action.
Yeah, so I can do a quick news run. First news I think for this week was interesting that I found was Google latest AI video generation. These days they come with a paper and a demonstration and a video, and then you wait until it hits the actual mainstream. But the video is pretty cool. The idea is that they're solving technical problems so that the videos become more and more stable over time, right? If you've seen the demo of those videos they come up with, they basically made of a collection of images that have been stitched together by, generating image after image and then running them. And then there's a lot of variety between it. So it creates an interesting effect, but it's not really useful for most creative needs. So this technology seems promising. What it does, it's basically able to generate realistic videos of what they call a space-time spun, right? So they've kind of basically able to think about 5 seconds of video without a lot of jittering. That's pretty interesting, pretty cool video, pretty good demo. I think realistic, high-quality videos, multi-second, undetectable are coming.
Meta's just released another Code Llama, a sort of larger and better version of their LLM. We keep saying Meta are doing some really great things. It's performing better than GPT-4. So, once again, this is another option, open source. And I think that open sourceness of what they're doing, I think, is interesting.
Have you seen the news about Alphabet ending their contract with Australian AI company called Appen?
No, what happened there?
Turns out there's a public company on the ASX called Appen, which is contracted by the big boys, big tech, for AI training. And the article says how they lost a bunch of business. So the first thing is to learn that this is a company from 1996 that's already listed that does AI training and with big companies. So I completely missed that. So I learned something today. And also it shows how, the big boys are bringing all the capabilities in-house. It kind of has the same feeling of how Apple is now doing their own silicon, their own computers, their own everything. So I expect that, the tech titans would basically seek to be vertically integrated. I think that's one of those examples. Another news item, ReCraft raised 9.4 million Series A. Seen that?
What are they doing?
Khosla Ventures invested in ReCraft, 9.4 UK pound. I think it's a good validation to the creative use case. So, you can chat with ChatGPT and say, give me a picture here and there, that's cute. But if you actually have a workflow for ad agencies, creative agencies, and so forth, marketing departments, so forth, you need a tool that is a tool around the work, like a workflow tool around the tech. ReCraft that's what they're doing. And I think it's an interesting validation for the creative use case. I mean, we've seen Adobe playing with it. We've seen Canva playing with it. Now we see workflows, that's kind of the mouse, those technologies, all of the Adobe products, Canva product, they based on the mouse. At the beginning, it was all about, graphical user interfaces, graphical editing. And AI happens, so they adopt an AI and they're trying to innovate. And here ReCraft comes from an AI native approach, and someone's making a bet on that, like Khosla. I think it validates some of the stuff we've been talking about in this conversation. And the last item for this week for me is, so Meta is beginning to train the Lambda 3 and aims to open source AGI. So 2-3 years ago, Zuckerberg's all in on the metaverse. And it was very cringy to watch their metaverse video and splash. And it's been criticized by everyone of, throwing billions of dollars on hardware. And then if you remember before that, Meta did a bunch of crypto noise. They wanted to do their own coin, and now they're doing AGI. So they're going to do the open source AGI. I don't know. Meta makes money by selling us ad while we waste our time on social media that also brainwash us and leads to more extremism in society and disinformation. So let's just call it for what Meta really is. And they're trying everything they can to pivot out of that business model. And now they're going to be the open source AGI. I guess the question is, will they pivot again in 2 years? Or is this one is going to be the one that sticks? I don't know. The jury's out. I've got my doubts. But it's an interesting move by Mr. Zook. What's your take?
Yeah, look, I keep saying I think they're the dark horse a little bit. They're not a lot. I think they are doing a lot. I think the open sourceness is ironic that OpenAI aren't open source and Meta are. I think that's a bit of a funny one. There's some interesting things I think they could do in the end. And if you look at I don't know if you've seen their Ray-Ban glasses, for example. where you can start to wear some, they look like normal glasses. I think they're playing in all these different spaces, but they're integrating those LLM models into the glasses. And if you think about that, I've seen some videos where the latest versions of those, you look at something and it identifies what it is and tells you what it is. So it might be a plant or something. They'll go, this is what the plant is. And it's using both computer vision, using AI, and then, using their LLM models. And so,
but open source LLM models, right?
yeah, that's right. They are. I think the terms of use of those is different for depending on the models. But look, I think they may have something there. And the question is going to be how the developer community uses what they're doing. I think we're seeing that in some cases. Once again, every one of the big players is giving options. There's different flavors, different ways to do things. An article that I read that was shared with me by one of our investors the other week, actually. It was an article in PitchBook about the pullback from investors and how there's been an environment where investors are really stepping out of VC. And, I guess the numbers show that, investors are getting great returns with relatively little risk based on interest rates and so forth. And so, there's a couple of really interesting things that we can see around that in terms of the number of deals. If you look at Q4, have been really a lot lower than they have been for some period in time. And so it does show a bit of a pullback. There was a bit of a discussion around how unicorns, the number of unicorns have come down a lot in 2023 and 22. Obviously, 2021 was a really big year. Look, this makes some sense given the economic environment. What I think was really highlighted to me was that they're saying, being a generalist in this environment, there's not really as much opportunity as there was before.
Did they say anything specific about AI funds?
Yeah, look, I think they ended pretty much talking about, whilst VC's at an 8-year low, really the hunger for specialized funds. So funds that are in AI or genomics or robotics, those key areas that we believe are really going to grow and going through the roof is where it's at. It's really confirming a lot of what we've been saying for a while, that this is the area of growth. Equally, the economic climate is difficult, and we are seeing, a lot of startups that are falling by the wayside. Now is the time, invest low. This is the time when great companies are created. And we see historically 2008, 2009, great vintage for companies to come out. So we feel we're back in that point. What's your take on where we're at in the economic cycle and equally the opportunity right now?
On the one hand, I'm glad to see that we're well positioned. On the other hand, I'm not happy to see someone advertising it, because then all our competitors are, also see that we are well positioned. This article basically says what we both of us already know. The demand supply curve is a bit, changed since 2021. Less wild startups, less money chasing, less deals, and the natural reaction is that you need to specialize in order to find the better deals at a better valuation.
But I think one of the key points in that specialization is you need to be able to have that both technical background to see what's happening. And I think, previously we had a bit of a formula, particularly around waiting for companies to have a certain formula. We've seen other people pile in. Now, I believe that's not going to be the case in where we're at. We're seeing some companies that are generating quite a lot of cash, let's say, after a few months. There's one particular company, I can't name the company, generating, several millions of dollars of revenue right now after 3 or 4 months from startup point. And I think this is where some of those opportunities are going to lie. It's not going to look like what previous companies looked like. Particularly 2024, what I'm thinking about, I'm seeing some really great founders who have had successful businesses, either exiting those businesses, stepping down as CEO and starting new businesses. And these are, the difference between now and maybe before is they've got experience, they understand technology. So it's not like they've worked through internet and cloud and all these other platform shifts, and they're seeing now as being this big step change. I'm seeing this type of founder that I'm excited about working with. We're excited about funding, and I think this is a really interesting time for that to be the case. One thing that was highlighted to me this week, Dror, was, and this is probably the next topic I wanted to touch on, was about the way AI is impacting. I found for the first time this week, I book flights. I'm traveling a lot. It was the first time that I actually used a plugin within, ChatGPT to look at my options, plan out, book directly through the interface.
How was it?
Look, I found it useful. I found it gave me a better deal than what I was when I was just searching. Just a domestic trip. But what it did was, I really asked, book me flights, book me a car if I wanted a car. I wanted to sort of see what it would do. and that was using the Kayak plugin, which sort of jumped out, gave me all the deals that I wanted, and it was significantly cheaper. So it's the first time that I'm sort of seeing that.
Really?
I've had two startups come to me this week, both showing me some of their things they're doing by putting various plugins together to create a unique solution. I think it's going to become very useful, and I think it's going to go from just the LLMs being able to give you some information to doing something. What's your sort of thoughts on how that plugins are going to work, or where we're going with some of this now, and what are you seeing?
The intuition of those nerds from Silicon Valley is probably right. The question becomes like, when will assistants replace websites? I guess I want to ask you, how was the experience? Was it text based?
Look, essentially, it was staying within the Chat GPT around giving me options, and then to jump out to essentially the website.
And did they list things in text form, or did they have like boxes and buttons and stuff like that?
It gave options with visual cues like a Google search would in terms of showing what that is.
Okay.
And then you being able to click through to, the contextual booking. Probably 3 steps. Ask the question, see what it is, and then do the thing straight away. Now, I'm seeing more and more of these, not just informational, not just summarizing, but actually doing things. We're seeing a lot of startups in that space really take it going forward.
This is an example of mainstream adoption. I think the user interfaces are going to need to improve a bit, but we're heading there. There's no reason why the interface needs to be text. It can be buttons, it can be boxes of information. If I'm booking a bunch of flights or a bunch of our car, do I want to see the car I'm selecting, or do I want to read about it? You can see from where we are now to where it's going to get. Excited as well. Look, I'm using ChatGPT constantly. I'm coding, I'm doing a bunch of AI coding these days. And it just changes the way you code. Instead of just writing something, you don't even start with the code and then you debug. You start with like, hey, how would I have done that? Copying it in. Hey, there's a bug. Change that. It just becomes a dialogue. And it's a very productive way to build stuff. As you know, I'm very bullish about this new paradigm for software.
I think you raised a good point around dialogue. I'm talking more and more with the interfaces. So I don't know if you've played around with that much. What I'm starting to see is it's getting better and better, more realistic. Pauses, for example, when an AI is calling someone, is being filled in a lot better. So it might be more human-like in terms of throwing in, a generic, the great question, giving it time to process what's happening. And so they've got pre-processed answers, which make it feel more human-like. So I think once again, this is taking us to that next level. We're seeing more conversational things getting better. We're seeing the images and video. Some of the video generation is becoming super powerful. And I'd love for us to maybe explore that a bit more around where we're going with that. But the combination of all of this, I think, is going to make that realistic interface and solutions, particularly interesting. And one of the companies that we can't talk about that we're deep in DD with right now is a company that is having significant uptick with people interacting with bots, interacting in multimodal ways. And, to your point, I think how we're not going to have applications like we are that's going to feel like real conversations, not just typing conversations, but I think this will be the year where voice and video comes into that. And we've got opportunities that we're seeing in that space that I think are really fascinating, opening a can of worms, and the legislation around declaring whether you're talking to an AI, I think is going to come to the forefront as well. Some of the regulatory things that we talked about. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. Exciting things going on. It's great to talk, and we'll catch up next week. That's This Week in AI.
See you later.